Hi everyone. So in this video, I'm going to explain one another interesting function of an Excel, that is pivot table. Now, if you are in a job or in a business where you have to analyze lots of information on a day-to-day basis, then this is the tool for you. Pivot table basically summarizes the raw information which, let's say, available into some other table into a much more meaningful way or into a much more meaningful form, which you can use it for your purpose to analyze that information further. Now, pivot table is a dynamic table which can be configured as per our needs and the requirement, where we can decide what information we want in rows, what information we want in columns, what filter we want to apply, and automatically by just one click of a button, a dynamic table would be created for you. Now today in this video, I am going to explain the end-to-end functionality of a pivot table and help you understand how we can convert a raw information into a meaningful information. So now let's start with an example. So this is a raw table that is available. This is a raw table of employee sales data. This contains employee names, the city in which they are active, their employee ID, the division they belong to, the sales year, and the sales they did in that particular year. This table is basically in a raw form. Now to analyze this table further, to make the information more meaningful, I would create a pivot table on this raw table. To create a pivot table, first select the raw table completely, go to Insert, click on Pivot Table here, then this small box would come. This small box have two options. First, you want to create a pivot table into a new worksheet, or you want to create this pivot table into the existing worksheet. Let's say I want to create a pivot table here. So I would basically click on existing worksheet. I would select where I want to create. I would click on that box where I want to create, click on that cells where I want to create that pivot table. I would click here and I would click OK. When I click OK, it would create a placeholder for the pivot table. And in the right side, you see one more table that is coming up. This table is the pivot configuration table, where you can configure the pivot table as per your own needs and the requirements. So the upper portion of the pivot configuration table is known as field, which contains the columns of the raw table. The lower portion of the pivot configuration table is known as dimension, which is used to configure the pivot table using the fields available or the columns available in this space. So let's take a problem statement. Let's say I want to see the total sales of each employee. For that, I would drag the name from the field space to the row dimension here. Now all the names are now coming as rows. If I drag names instead of rows to columns, then all the names now would be coming as a column here. Let me again change it to the rows. Now I want to see the total sales of each employee. For that, I would drag sales from the field space to the value dimension here. Now value dimension is used for all calculation, all the logic you want to design, you can design using the value dimension here. Right now it is showing the total sales of each employee. If I want to validate, I can just double click on the value and it will show the breakup of those values. For example, I wanted to know why the John sales is $2,500. So I would double click here. Now it will show the breakup of John. The John did sales in 2015 and 16 amounted to $2,500 here. Currently, these numbers are basically coming in a random order. If I want to sort these numbers out, I can go to the row label here. I can choose sorting options. I can choose descending on the basis of sum of sales and click OK. Now it will showing the numbers in the descending order. Currently, it is showing sales. Now, instead of sales, I want to see the count of sales, that how many times a person did sales in the year. So I would go to the sum of sales here. I would go to the value field setting. Instead of sum, I would select count here. Now it is showing me the count of each sales. For example, John did sales in year 2015 and 16. So so it is showing the count is 2. Swati did sales only once, so it is showing the sales as well, it count as 1. So any logic you want to apply, you can use the value dimension here, and you can use any of the option available in the value field setting. Now, my second problem statement is I want to see the sales in each year. For that, it means I want to see the column names to be appearing as a column. Sorry, year name to be appearing as a column here. For that, I would drag the sales here from this field space to the column dimension here. Now all the sales are now coming as all the years are now coming as a column names here, and I want to see the total sales value. So instead of count of sales, I want to see, I will again reselect it to sum of sales. So now it is showing me the sum of sales of each employee with the year segregation. So John did sales in 2015 and 16 amounted to $1,000 and $1,500 amounted to $2,500. Now you can further reconfigure this table using multiple options available in the design tab. This tab would only be visible if you are clicking on the pivot table. If you click outside, that would be hidden and that would disappear. So you have to again click on the pivot table. When you go to the design, you can choose any of the pivot table style as per your need. Right now I'm happy with the current style I've chosen, so I would not change the style. Then we have a layout option here. You can choose any of the layout which makes the information much more meaningful. For example, you don't want to see the column P, you don't want to see the grand total, you don't want to see the grand total for columns or for the rows. So you can go to the design tab. You can off the grand total for rows and column. Now the grand total is disappeared, or you can only on it for rows, or you can only on it for columns, or you can basically on it for both rows and column. Second is the report layout. There is a multiple ways you can use the report layout. One use case is, for example, you are seeing the headers here. This headers does not make any sense. If I want to change it to much more sensible name, you can change the layout from the compact form to outline form. Now this name has been changed exactly the name that has been defined here. Also, you can change the names as well. You can change the value of these names. For example, instead of sales here, I can double click here. I can click here. I can do right click here. I can go to the field setting and I can change the name to any name whichever I want. For example, I want sales here. Sales year 1. Now this name would change to sales year 1 now. So there are multiple ways you can use the report layout. I would take one more use case to explain the other functions of the report layout. Now my problem statement is to create a pivot table with only 3 columns, that is name, city, and the sales dollar value. So before I create this problem statement, let's clear this pivot table by dragging this field back to the field space. Now my problem statement is to create a table with 3 columns, that is name, city, and dollars value. So dollar value I will drag it to the values, name to the rows, and when I'm dragging city to the rows, it would not create a separate column for the city. It would make the city as the level 2. So name is the level 1, city is the level 2. If I drag employee ID as well, it becomes level 3. Let me drag the employee ID back. And if I'm dragging the city to the column, it would create multiple columns based on the city names. But my problem statement is to only have 3 columns, that is name, city, and sum of sales. To create the table in this way, we'll go to the design, we'll go to the report layout and select show in tabular form layout. Now we have 3 columns, that is name, city, and sum of sales. Now the another thing that you see here is that subtotal is also coming and the grand total is also coming at the bottom. To remove this subtotal and the grand total, I will again go to the design. I will go to the subtotal layout and select this option, that is do not show subtotals. And I will go to the grand total and I would switch off the grand total for rows and columns. But still I can see a button-like figure coming up here. To remove the button, I would go to the pivot table, analyze, and select plus minus button. Now we have 3 columns, that is name, city, and sum of sales. That is what we needed. So that is all about the pivot table. The intent of this video is basically to clear the basics of the pivot, so that once you analyze the complex information, you can use these basics to create the pivot as per the needs that you have. That's all about this video. Thank you so much for watching the channel and this video.